Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
In a short time, he build everything. But he found that the local workers, they do their work well, but they only work a certain number of hours a day, and then they would go on. So he said to the contractor, I want to pay them more, and then they'll work longer hours and they'll work harder, and then we'll get it finished more quickly. So the contractor said, no, don't pay them more, they'll work more slowly. So he couldn't understand it. So anyway, the next day he paid all the workers 50% more. They were paid on a daily basis. So the next day no one came to work. He couldn't understand why. So he went into the village and asked all the people, why aren't you coming to work today? He said, well, you gave us more money, we have enough money for today, so we'll come when we need some more money. They weren't interested in economic development, they were just interested in getting enough money to live. But actually, although from the Western point of view this may seem like lazy, as Prabhupada pointed out, they're not lazy in the matter of spiritual understanding. That in traditional Indian culture, people, they may not be very interested in working hard to get lots of money, but it doesn't mean that they're simply sleeping 16 hours a day. They'll be up early in the morning, taking bath, doing puja,
Они совершают пуджу.
They'll go, even today you see people, they'll go on tours, they'll go walking for days and days and days to some holy place. So although they may not be very interested for economic development, it's not that they're lazy, but their priorities of life are different, because they understand that the goal of life is to attain to God consciousness.
Бога.
So they do whatever is necessary to get enough food, clothing and shelter, and the rest of the time they spend for developing God consciousness. Now this is ideal God-conscious culture. Of course, within Vedic culture there are different groups of people. Jnanis, yogis, bhaktas. And the karmi, he's actually materialistic. And then he's not a gross materialist as in the modern age. He knows that there are laws of karma and that he has to act in such a manner that he doesn't become highly sinful. So even then, even if he's materialistic, he's protected from gross sinful activities. If they're going to do this, they should do it before the class. It's a disturbance in the middle of the class. Why don't you do it tomorrow? Come on time and do it on time. So anyway, devotees, they have taken up Krishna consciousness. She wants more books? Okay.
Can you give books?
I guess so. We're also having disturbances. Just give the whole packet. Push it forward. Devotees have, by taking up Krishna consciousness, they have rejected the values of the materialistic culture. They have adopted a different goal of life. And there are many manifestations of that decision to change their lives. Devotee dress is different to that of karmis. Food is different. The goal of life is different. Life is different.
Также отличается.
For instance, rising early, taking bath, spending much time every day engaged in chanting the names of God. The basic activities of Krishna consciousness are hearing and chanting about and serving Krishna. But what we may call the cultural aspects, they're also very important. For instance, if we dress like a devotee, then it helps us to feel like a devotee. Like a policeman, when he's in uniform, he feels fit for the job. Actually, the way we dress, the way we eat, the way we think, all these cultural aspects are also training for going back home, back to Godhead. Because Krishna consciousness is the culture of the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, Krishna wears a dhoti, and all the gopis, they wear saris, and Krishna eats, I'll say, Shukta Shakadi Dali Dalita Shukta Shakadi Bhaji Nalita Kushmanda Dali Dalna Dugda Tumbi Dadi Mocha Kanda. There are so many descriptions of what Krishna eats. So many varied preparations. Bitter vegetable soup, then varieties of green vegetables, fried vegetables, preparations made from pumpkin, dal, then dalma, which means dal cooked with vegetables. Dali dalna, dugdutumbi, it means squash cooked in milk, yogurt, and mocha kanda means preparations made from the banana flowers. You'll find in Chaitanya Charitamrita long lists of all the different foods that are offered to Krishna. So these are the kind of foods that Krishna eats. In the spiritual world, there's lots of singing and dancing, but that style is that which is pleasing to Krishna. It's not rock music or disco music or jazz or blues or any such thing. But the style that is pleasing to Krishna is reflected in the traditional kirtan styles. So all this culture means it's all based on acting in a way, doing things that are pleasing to Krishna. Krishna himself dresses in a dhoti, and he likes to see all his associates dressed in dhotis. And although in Paris they have fashion shows and the ladies of this world like to dress in the different fashions, Krishna likes Radharani to dress in a sari, not in Paris fashions. So devotees, they adopt all these, the Krishna conscious culture. All the devotees adopt all these aspects of Krishna conscious culture because it is pleasing to Krishna. Now, more or less we could say that is Indian culture. It is not that Krishna is Indian. Sometimes people ask, why are you worshipping an Indian god? This is a misunderstanding. But rather, the culture of India most closely represents that of the spirit. Because India is especially the most important place in the universe where one can easily become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead. So, to a large extent, we could say that we are following Indian culture, or Hindu culture. But a deeper understanding is this is the original culture of the spiritual world. Now, Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce this as much as possible, and therefore we see that Prabhupada introduced this, how we dress, how we eat, so many things. When Prabhupada first went to America, a Ramakrishna Mission sannyasi told him that now you have to change your life. He said, it's very cold here, not like India, so wearing a dhoti is not practical, and you have to eat meat and drink alcohol to keep warm. This was a so-called sannyasi speaker, and he said that, well, you have to get used to the Western way of life, otherwise people won't listen to you. You have to eat your meat with a knife and fork. So Prabhupada said, no, I will teach them to wear dhotis and saris and sit on the floor and take Krishna prasad, eating with their hands. He said that so many Indians go to America to beg something, to beg some technology. Prabhupada said, I have not come to beg anything but to give something. Similarly, when the famous poet Allen Ginsberg, he said that, he said to Prabhupada, you're getting people to chant Hare Krishna, but do you think, this was in the very early days, he said, but can you make them Brahmins? Because Allen Ginsberg had been to India and he'd seen Indian Brahmins, how they keep very clean, very strict in following many rituals, and they're very learned in scripture. Prabhupada said, yes, I will make these American boys and girls Brahmins. Allen Ginsberg saw the hippies with long hair, taking drugs and having free sex. He didn't believe it was possible. Prabhupada had full faith that by the power of the holy name, everything is possible. So Prabhupada, along with the chanting of the holy name, introduced this culture, this culture supports and nourishes the practices of Krishna Bhakti. An example can be given of culture like a tightrope walker. You know, in the circus they walk on a high rope, it's called a tightrope. The tightrope walker, they have a net beneath them. So if they fall from the tightrope, they're saved by that. So in practicing Krishna consciousness, we're walking on a tightrope. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. It's not easy for everyone to follow all these things. Now in the Western countries, if we fall down from Krishna consciousness, we fall down into gross sense gratification. But we find those who are brought up in Vedic culture that even if they don't take the Krishna consciousness very seriously, they don't fall down very deeply because they have this culture. Until recently, among the vast majority of people in India, illicit sex, gambling, meat eating and intoxication, they were never even considered to be indulged in. So we want to introduce this culture into the Western world. It's a very great challenge to do so.
Это огромный труд.
Because as I was saying, it means a complete changing of our goals of life. In Krishna consciousness, we have accepted a different goal of life to that of materialistic people. We should also understand the necessity of adopting the culture that fosters Krishna consciousness. The more we remain attached to the culture of materialistic society, the more it will be difficult for us to maintain Krishna consciousness. Now traditionally, culture is passed down from generation to generation in families, but we don't have that culture in the Western world. So we have to try and learn that. Srila Prabhupada gave so many instructions on the details of Vaishnava behavior. Many of these have not been systematically collected into, they may not be in his books or may not be systematically written in his books. I've been compiling a book on the subject of Vaishnava etiquette, culture and behavior for the last 11 years. And there are so many different points going down to every detail of the way we lead our lives. So today I just gave a general introduction about what is Vaishnava culture and the need for it. And in the next few days I'd like to speak more about different detailed topics. Tomorrow I'd like to speak about family life in Krishna consciousness, because I was just saying that culture is passed down through the family tradition, and the building block or the basic unit of any society is the family. And modern life, family life, the values of modern family life are quite different to those of traditional societies, and especially to those of Vedic society. So other things I'd like to speak about in the next few days are about kirtan and dancing, some standards about that, Vaishnava appearance and dress, cleanliness, prasad preparation and serving, some basic points about pronunciation of Sanskrit. These are some practical points that we can all adopt in our lives. They're not very difficult. It simply requires a little conscientiousness to be aware what should be done and what should not be done, what Krishna wants us to do in every aspect of our lives. Generally, devotees think when we speak about Vaishnava etiquette that we're going to speak about devotee relationships, which is certainly a major part of understanding Vaishnava etiquette. And I may, if I have time, I may speak on that also in the next few days. But actually Vaishnava etiquette covers the whole scope of behavior and life. And as devotee relationships have been discussed and in many forums and are being discussed here in other forums, I may not go into that so much in this seminar. What I'm going to speak is going to be based on various sources. A Vaishnava should always speak according to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So many of these points, actually all of these points, you'll find they're all delineated in Shastra. Maybe some fine details you won't find in any Shastra. But even many of the fine details, they are in Shastra also. And another major source of understanding this is the living Vaishnava traditions, which are still existing in India today. If you simply go down to the bazaar in any Indian town, you may not see so much of that. You may just think it's just as materialistic as anywhere else. But actually, if you go below the surface, you'll find there's so much culture still in India today. So tradition, aitihya, that's called in Sanskrit, aitihya, is one of the accepted sources of gaining knowledge. That is especially important in understanding culture and behavior. Within the scope of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, that falls within the category of Sadhu, how the saintly people act, how they practically enact the tenets of Shastra within their lives. And of course there are various cultural traditions within the greater Vaishnava culture, within the greater Vedic culture. So as Rupa Goswami writes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is translated as the Nectar of Devotion, that the basic principles of devotional service are the same for everybody, and these he has delineated within the Nectar of Devotion. But he says that there are many details which individual gurus, they may teach a little bit differently, and there's no harm in that. This doesn't mean that everyone can simply speculate and do as he likes, but it means that individual gurus, they follow their own gurus within specific tradition. And especially empowered acharyas, they'll never change the basic principles, but they may make some adjustments of details according to time, place and circumstance. So Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and for preaching Krishna consciousness in the West, he made some adjustments according to time, place and circumstance. Because he was an expert in Acharya, empowered by Krishna, he was able to bring the essence of Krishna consciousness, even though some of the details may have been slightly adjusted. Prabhupada compared his bringing Krishna consciousness to the West to transplanting a tulsi plant. That although the soil may be different, the basic plant is the same. Now it's a fact that the soil of India, or the cultural atmosphere of India, is by its very nature more conducive for Krishna consciousness than the West. However, tulsi doesn't grow just according to the soil. Tulsi especially responds where there is bhakti. So, of course, the soil, it shouldn't be just, there should be some nutrients also. It shouldn't be like completely the wrong soil. That means that we can't be Krishna conscious if we're eating meat, gambling, and having sinful life. But if there's a true spirit of devotion, then despite the lack of cultural nutrition, still the plant of devotional service will grow very nicely. So bhakti is the goal of devotional service and of Vaishnava culture, and bhakti is the essence of Vaishnava culture. If there's a little bhakti by following the principles of Vaishnava culture, that bhakti will develop more and more and more. However, even if one follows all the rules and regulations of the Vedic literatures but doesn't have any bhakti, then the bhakti won't develop. Those who follow the rules and regulations of Vedic culture very strictly but don't have as their goal of life to please Krishna, they're called smartas. Smarta means those who are very much attached to the rules and regulations in the smritis. So Vaishnavas, they also have smriti. Hari Bhakti Vilas is a Vaishnav smriti. Smriti means supplementary Vedic literature which gives rules and regulations on how to conduct our lives. So we don't want to become like the smartas, simply attached to following rules and regulations just for the sake of them. But we follow the rules and regulations because we know this is pleasing to Krishna and will help us to develop our love for Krishna. So there are many points to discuss, and I'll go on discussing them from tomorrow, and I'll finish the lecture here this evening.
I think many of you may know that I'm also writing books. So I also like to distribute some of these books. The latest book of mine, which has been published in Russian, is the story of Rasikananda, which is the story of a great Gauriya Vaishnava preacher shortly after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's an exciting story of his preaching adventures, translated from Bengali, and it also helps to give some insights into the Vaishnava culture that was prevalent at that time. I also have another couple of my books in Russian here, which you can give the names of. So I request you to encourage me in my service to Srila Prabhupada of writing these books by purchasing them. And you can also benefit by getting the spiritual knowledge. Hare Krishna. We'll finish that. And also.